They say birthdays are meant to be celebrated, that they're supposed to remind you of love, of family, of all the reasons you matter in this world. I used to believe that. I used to wake up on my birthday feeling grateful, hopeful even. But today, my 55th birthday, I woke up in a place I never imagined I'd be. A place that smells of disinfectant and loneliness. A place where my own daughter left me to rot. My name is Bruna, and this is the story of how the people I loved most in the world decided I was no longer worth keeping. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when my daughter, Sophia, looked at me like I was her entire universe. When she was small, she would crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, pressing her tiny body against mine, whispering, "Mama, don't let go." And I never did. Not through the nights when fevers spiked and I sat awake beside her, cooling her forehead with damp cloths. Not through the years after her father died, when I worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. Not through her teenage rebellion, her heartbreaks, her fears about the future. I held on, always. Even when she met him, Daniel, my son-in-law, the man who called me Mama Bruna, with that warm smile that fooled everyone, including me. He was charming, attentive, the kind of man who remembered your favorite tea and asked about your day. When Sophia brought him home 7 years ago, I thought, finally, someone who will take care of my girl. Someone who would love her the way she deserved. I was so blind. The changes were gradual, so subtle that I didn't notice them until it was too late. At first, it was small things. Daniel suggesting that Sophia shouldn't visit me so often because they needed couple time. Him joking, always joking, that I was getting a bit forgetful when I'd ask the same question twice. Him encouraging Sophia to focus on their future, their house, their plans, as if I was somehow standing in the way of all that. And Sophia, my beautiful, trusting daughter, began to pull away. Not all at once, just slowly, like a thread being tugged from a sweater until the whole thing starts to unravel. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became less frequent. Excuses became more creative. "Sorry, Mom. Daniel has a work thing. We're so busy with the house renovations. Maybe next week?" Next week never came. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this was normal, that married daughters naturally drift toward their husbands, that I needed to give them space. I convinced myself that love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. But then came my birthday, today. I woke up this morning in my small apartment, the one I'd lived in for 30 years, where Sophia's height marks still decorated the kitchen doorframe. I made myself coffee, the same way I always did, and waited. I'd mentioned my birthday to Sophia last week during one of our brief phone calls. She'd said, "Of course, Mom, we'll do something special." Her voice had that distracted quality it always had lately, but I clung to those words like a lifeline. I waited all morning. I baked a small cake, just in case they came. I wore the dress Sophia had given me 2 Christmases ago. The blue one, she said, brought out my eyes. I sat by the window, watching cars pass, waiting for the sound of her footsteps on the stairs. By noon, my phone finally rang. My heart leapt. "Sophia? Bruna." It was Daniel's voice. Formal, cold, not the warm son-in-law voice he used to use. "We need to talk. Sophia and I have made a decision." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "A decision? What do you mean?" "We think it's time you moved somewhere more appropriate, somewhere with professional care." I laughed. I actually laughed, because surely this was some kind of mistake. Professional care? Daniel? I'm 55 years old. I'm perfectly healthy. I don't need— You're forgetting things, Bruna. You left the stove on twice last month. You called Sophia at 3 in the morning thinking it was afternoon. You're becoming a danger to yourself. My hand started shaking. That's not true. We've already arranged everything. There's a facility, a very nice one, and they're expecting you this afternoon. We'll help you pack. Daniel, please let me talk to Sophia. Sophia agrees with me. This is what's best for everyone. The line went dead. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone and feeling my entire world crumble. They were coming to take me away, on my birthday, without even asking me, without even giving me a choice. When they arrived an hour later, Sophia wouldn't look at me. She stood in my doorway, her eyes fixed on the floor, while Daniel did all the talking. He moved through my apartment with the efficiency of someone disposing of an inconvenience, pointing at things. This, not that. Deciding what pieces of my life were worth keeping. "Sophia," I whispered, reaching for her hand. "Baby, please, talk to me. Tell me what's happening." She flinched away from my touch. That flinch broke something inside me that I don't think will ever heal. "It's for the best, Mom," she said, her voice so small I barely recognized it. "You need help. I can't what? Can't visit me? Can't call me? Can't remember that I'm your mother?" Daniel stepped between us, his smile gone now, his true face finally showing. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. The car is waiting." The nursing home? They called it an assisted living facility, but I know what it is. Sits at the edge of town, a gray building surrounded by other gray buildings. The receptionist smiled at me with practiced sympathy when we arrived, the kind of smile you give to people you feel sorry for but don't actually care about. "Room 217, she said cheerfully. "Second floor. You'll love it here, Mrs. Bruna. Everyone does." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab Sophia and shake her until she woke up from whatever spell Daniel had cast over her, but I didn't. I just followed them down the hallway, my small suitcase, containing clothes Daniel had chosen, as if I couldn't even be trusted to pack for myself, rolling behind me. Room 217 is small, a bed with industrial-grade sheets, a chair by the window, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. The walls are beige, the kind of beige that's meant to be calming but just feels empty. "Well," Daniel said, looking around with satisfaction, "this will do nicely. You'll be comfortable here." I turned to Sophia one last time. "Please," I said, "don't do this. Don't leave me here." For just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt, maybe even regret. But then Daniel's hand was on her shoulder, squeezing, and the moment passed. "Happy birthday, Mama," Sophia whispered, and then she was gone. Daniel lingered for a moment, making sure the staff member had left the room. Then he leaned close, so close I could smell his cologne, that expensive scent he wore like armor, and his voice dropped to a whisper that made my blood freeze. "Rot in there, you miserable old woman." The door clicked shut, and I was alone. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that closed door, waiting for it to open again, waiting for Sophia to come back, to tell me this was all a terrible mistake, that she'd never meant for this to happen. But the door stayed closed, and the silence in that little beige room was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. That night, I sat by the window of room 217 and watched the sun set over a parking lot full of cars that would take other people home to their families. I thought about all the birthdays I'd celebrated with Sophia, the homemade cakes, the silly songs, the way she'd insisted on making me breakfast in bed every year, even when she was too young to reach the stove safely. I thought about the promises we'd made to each other after her father died, that we'd always have each other, that family meant never being alone, and I cried. Not the gentle tears of sadness, but the deep, wrenching sobs of someone whose heart is being ripped from their chest. I cried for the daughter I'd lost, for the life I'd been forced to leave behind, for the birthday that should have been filled with love, but instead became the day I learned what it meant to be truly abandoned. But somewhere, deep beneath the grief and the shock and the overwhelming sense of betrayal, something else stirred. Something I didn't recognize at first because I'd never needed it before. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculating kind. The kind that watches and waits and remembers every detail, because I might be 55 years old. I might be alone in this sterile room, discarded like yesterday's newspaper, but I am not broken. Not yet. And Daniel, charming, manipulative Daniel, made one critical mistake when he looked at me with those cold eyes and told me to rot. He underestimated me. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to our channel. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and it really helps our work. And comment below with what city you're watching from. The first week in this place taught me things I never wanted to know, like how silence can be louder than screaming, how invisibility doesn't require magic, just indifference, how quickly you can go from being someone's whole world to being nobody at all. They have routines here. Breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 5. Pills distributed with mechanical efficiency by nurses whose faces I can't seem to remember because they never really look at me. Not the way you look at a person. More the way you look at a task that needs completing. I tried calling Sophia that first night. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial the number I'd known by heart for 27 years. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What would I even say? Please come get me? I don't belong here? How could you do this to your own mother? I called again the next morning, and the afternoon after that. By the 3rd day, her number was blocked. When I tried to call, all I got was a mechanical voice telling me the subscriber was unavailable. My own daughter had erased me. The other residents here don't talk much. Mrs. Chen in the room next to mine spends her days staring at a photo album, turning the same pages over and over, looking for faces that stopped visiting years ago. Across the hall, there's a man named Robert who calls out for his son every evening around 6 o'clock, right when families are sitting down to dinner together. Nobody answers him. Nobody ever does. We are the forgotten ones, the inconvenient ones, the people whose families decided that love has an expiration date. I started keeping track of the visitors in a little notebook I found in the communal room, not because I'm nosy, but because I needed to understand the pattern. To see if I was the only one, or if abandonment was the rule rather than the exception here. Room 208, Mrs. Patterson. 2 visitors in 7 days. They stayed 15 minutes. Room 215, Mr. Garcia. No visitors. Ever. Room 223, Mrs. Walsh. 1 daughter who comes every Sunday, stays for exactly 1 hour, and leaves looking relieved to escape. Room 217, me. 0 visitors, 0 calls, 0 proof that I ever mattered to anyone. The staff here are kind in that professional way that costs nothing and means even less. They smile when they're supposed to smile. They nod when you speak, but you can see in their eyes that they're not really listening. You're just another pill to distribute, another meal to serve, another body to keep breathing until the family stops paying the bills. I tried to befriend some of them at first. The young nurse with the tired eyes who works the night shift. I asked her about her life, her dreams, anything to feel like a human being having a conversation, rather than a patient being managed. She was polite, but distant, the way you are with people you don't expect to know for long. That's sweet of you to ask, Mrs. Bruna, she said, adjusting my blankets with practiced efficiency. But I really should check on the others now. The others, as if we're interchangeable. As if it doesn't matter which lonely soul she tends to, because we're all just variations on the same theme of abandonment. By the 2nd week, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. Daniel came to the facility, not to see me, God forbid, but to speak with the administrator. I saw him through the window of the main office, shaking hands with Mr. Thornton, the man who runs this place. They were laughing about something. Comfortable? Familiar. Too familiar. I pressed myself against the wall outside the office door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. Their voices carried through the thin walls. The arrangement is working perfectly, Daniel was saying. His voice had that smooth quality he used when he was closing a deal. My wife is much more relaxed now that she doesn't have to worry about her mother's situation. Happy to help, Mr. Thornton replied. And the monthly payments have been very reliable. We appreciate clients who understand the value of our discretionary services. Discretionary services. The phrase hung in the air like poison. Just make sure she stays comfortable, Daniel continued. Nothing that would raise questions, but also nothing that would make her think she's getting out of here anytime soon. We need her settled. They both laughed at that. The sound made my blood run cold. I stumbled back to my room, my legs barely holding me up. This wasn't just abandonment. This was something worse. Something calculated. Daniel hadn't just convinced Sophia to put me here. He'd made arrangements. Financial arrangements. The kind that guaranteed I'd stay locked away, invisible, while he did. What? What was he getting out of this? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in that narrow bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them over and over, because counting gave my mind something to do besides spiral into panic. 63 tiles. I counted them 17 times before the sun came up. The next morning during breakfast, runny eggs and toast that tasted like cardboard. I forced myself to pay attention to everything around me, the way the staff interacted, the way certain residents got better treatment than others, the way Mr. Thornton walked through the dining hall like a landlord inspecting his property. That's when I noticed her, a young woman in her early 30s, wearing scrubs but moving differently than the other staff. She wasn't rushing through her tasks. She actually looked at people when they spoke, and when she helped Mrs. Chen with her breakfast, she did it with genuine gentleness, not just efficiency. Her name tag said, Marina. I watched her throughout the day. She worked harder than anyone else, staying late to help residents who needed extra care, sitting with Mr. Garcia while he ate dinner so he wouldn't be alone. She was different, and different meant she might actually care. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to approach her. She was in the hallway, checking her phone during what looked like a rare break. "Excuse me," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. "Marina?" She looked up, and for the first time since I'd arrived at this place, someone actually saw me. Not through me, not past me, at me. "Yes, Mrs. Bruna? Is everything all right?" Everything was so far from all right I didn't even know where to begin. But I couldn't tell her that. Not yet. I needed to know if I could trust her first. "I just wanted to say thank you," I said instead, "for the way you treat people here. Like they matter." Her expression softened. "They do matter. You all do." Something in the way she said it, like she actually meant it, made my throat tighten with tears I'd been holding back for weeks. "Can I ask you something?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "How long do people usually stay here?" Marina's face grew cautious. "It varies. Some people are here until they die," I finished for her. "Until their families forget they exist long enough that it stops feeling like abandonment and starts feeling like the natural order of things." She didn't deny it. That's how I knew she was honest. "Mrs. Bruna," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "Are you okay? Really?" I wanted to tell her everything. About Daniel's voice outside the office, about Sophia blocking my number, about the suffocating certainty that I'd been locked away not for my own good, but for someone else's convenience. But paranoia stopped me. What if she reported everything to Mr. Thornton? What if she was part of whatever arrangement Daniel had made? "I'm fine," I lied. "Just adjusting." But Marina's eyes told me she didn't believe me. And somehow, that small recognition, that tiny acknowledgement that something was wrong here, gave me the first spark of hope I'd felt since arriving. The third week brought a new humiliation. Daniel and Sophia came to visit. Together. The staff informed me that morning, their voices bright with false cheer, as if this was good news, as if I should be grateful. I spent 2 hours getting ready, brushing my hair until it shined, putting on the only decent dress I had left, practicing what I would say to Sophia, how I would make her understand that this was all a terrible mistake, how I would reach the daughter I'd raised, the girl who used to tell me I was her hero. They arrived at 2 o'clock. I was waiting in the common room, sitting in the chair with the best view of the door, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. Sophia looked beautiful, thinner than I remembered, with shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, but beautiful. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Expensive, the kind Daniel would approve of. Her hair was styled in a way that made her look older, harder. She barely looked at me when they walked in. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice flat, rehearsed. "Sophia." I stood up so fast I almost knocked over my chair. "Baby, I'm so glad you came. I need to talk to you. I need you to understand." "We can't stay long," Daniel interrupted, his hand firm on Sophia's shoulder. Possessive. "We just wanted to check in, make sure you're adjusting. As if this were a new job or a new apartment. As if I hadn't been ripped from my life and locked away like a criminal. "I want to come home," I said, looking directly at Sophia, ignoring Daniel completely. "Please, sweetheart. Whatever he told you, whatever he made you believe, it's not true. I don't need to be here. I'm fine. I've always been fine." Sophia's jaw tightened. "The doctors said—" "What doctors? I never saw any doctors. Nobody ever evaluated me. This is all him." I pointed at Daniel, not caring anymore about being polite or careful. He's lying to you. He's using you. Can't you see that? Daniel's expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold. This is exactly what we were worried about. The paranoia. The delusions. I'm not delusional. My voice rose, and I saw other residents turning to look. I didn't care. Sophia, listen to me. You know me. You've known me your entire life. When have I ever lied to you? For just a second, one beautiful, heartbreaking second, I saw doubt flicker across her face. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw my daughter again, the girl who trusted me, who loved me. But then Daniel squeezed her shoulder again, and the moment shattered. We should go, he said. This is too upsetting for her. No, wait. I reached for Sophia's hand, but she pulled away. I'm sorry, Mom, she whispered. But this is where you need to be. They left, just like that. 15 minutes. That's all I was worth. 15 minutes of their time, most of which Daniel spent making sure I couldn't say anything that might pierce through his carefully constructed lies. I made it back to my room before I collapsed. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside me, a place I didn't even know existed. They were the sounds of a mother losing her child, of a woman realizing that the person she'd loved most in the world was gone. Not dead, but gone in a way that might hurt even more. Because Sophia was still out there, still breathing, still living her life. She just didn't want me in it anymore. That night, Marina found me crying in the dark. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat down beside me on the edge of my bed and handed me a tissue, then another, then a whole box. They were here, I finally managed to say between sobs. My daughter and her husband. And she looked at me like I was a stranger. Marina was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question that changed everything. Do you want to tell me what's really going on, Mrs. Bruna? Because I've worked here for 3 years, and I know the difference between someone who needs care and someone who's been put away. I looked at her through my tears, really looked at her, and I made a decision that terrified me. I decided to trust her. Something's wrong, I whispered. Something's very wrong, and I think my son-in-law is behind it. Marina listened to everything. Every word I'd been holding inside since the day Daniel slammed that door and told me to rot. She didn't interrupt, didn't check her phone, didn't look at me with that pitying expression I'd grown so tired of seeing. She just listened, her dark eyes focused and alert, like every detail mattered. When I finished, my voice hoarse from talking and crying, she sat back and exhaled slowly. I knew something wasn't right, she said quietly. The way Mr. Thornton handles your account, the way your name comes up in private conversations, the instructions we've been given about you. My heart stuttered. Instructions? What kind of instructions? Marina glanced toward the door, making sure we were truly alone. Nothing medical, nothing that would help you, just restrictions. You're not allowed to use the facility phone without supervision. Your mail is screened before you receive it. You're discouraged from participating in group activities where you might talk to other residents' families. Each word landed like a stone in my chest. They're isolating me. Yes. Marina's expression was grim. And in my experience, when a facility goes to those lengths, it's because someone is paying them very well to do it. Daniel. I said his name like a curse. Probably. But I can't prove anything from my position. I'm just a staff member. They don't tell me about financial arrangements or special agreements. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. But I can tell you that this place isn't what it pretends to be. What do you mean? Marina stood and walked to the window, her arms crossed over her chest. Shady Pines is supposed to be a respectable assisted living facility. That's what the brochures say, what the website shows. But there's another side to it. A side for families who want their elderly relatives to simply disappear. Not officially, not illegally, just quietly enough that nobody asks questions. The room felt colder suddenly. How many people here are like me? More than you'd think. Old women whose children want their inheritance early. Elderly men whose families are tired of dealing with them. People who aren't sick enough to justify a nursing home, but inconvenient enough that their families pay premium rates to keep them hidden away. I thought about Mrs. Chen and her endless photo albums. Mr. Garcia calling for his son every evening. All of us, warehoused like unwanted furniture in a storage unit, waiting for someone to decide we were worth retrieving. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why risk your job? Marina turned back to face me, and I saw something fierce in her expression, something that made her seem older than her years. Because my grandmother died in a place like this, and I swore I'd never let it happen to someone else if I could help it. Over the next few days, Marina and I formed an alliance. A quiet, careful partnership built on whispered conversations during shift changes and notes passed like school children avoiding a strict teacher. She couldn't investigate openly. That would get her fired immediately. But she could watch, listen, pay attention to things others overlooked. And I could do something I hadn't been able to do in weeks. I could hope, but hope, I learned, doesn't protect you from humiliation. The facility organized what they called a family day at the end of my 4th week there. It was supposed to be a celebration, a chance for residents to spend quality time with their loved ones. The common room was decorated with cheap streamers and grocery store flowers. Tables were set up with cookies and punch that tasted like sugar water. I wasn't going to attend. What was the point? Sophia had made it clear she wanted nothing to do with me. But Marina encouraged me to go, to be visible, to remind people I existed. You never know, she said. Maybe seeing you in a public setting will make Sophia remember who you are, who you were to each other. I should have known better. The room filled with families throughout the afternoon, grandchildren running around with the manic energy of kids forced to visit elderly relatives they barely knew, adult children making stilted conversation with parents they'd deposited here and rarely thought about. But at least they came. At least they made the effort. I sat alone at a corner table, watching the door, hoping, even though hope felt like swallowing broken glass. Sophia and Daniel arrived at 3 o'clock. But they weren't alone. They brought someone with them, a woman I'd never seen before. She was younger than Sophia, maybe 28 or 29, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a dress that probably cost more than my entire month's rent used to be. They walked right past me, didn't even glance in my direction. I watched them move through the room, Daniel's hand resting possessively on the small of the blonde woman's back. Sophia walked slightly behind them, her shoulders hunched, her eyes fixed on the floor, the body language of someone who'd lost a fight before it even began. They stopped to talk to Mr. Thornton, all smiles and polite laughter. The blonde woman said something that made Daniel throw his head back in amusement. Sophia stood beside them like a ghost, there but not really present. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only sit there and watch my son-in-law parade another woman around while my daughter, my beautiful, heartbroken daughter, was forced to witness her own replacement. And they'd brought this spectacle here, to my prison, on family day. The cruelty of it was staggering. I stood up without thinking, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Several people turned to look, but I didn't care. I walked toward them on legs that felt disconnected from my body, propelled by something beyond reason or self-preservation. Sophia. My voice came out stronger than I expected, loud enough that conversations nearby faltered and died. She looked up, and the expression on her face broke something inside me that I didn't know could still break. She looked terrified, not of me, of him, of what he would do if she acknowledged me. Mom, she started, but Daniel cut her off. Bruna. He said my name like it was something distasteful he'd found on his shoe. We're in the middle of something. This isn't the time. Isn't the time? I heard my voice rising but couldn't stop it. When is the time, Daniel? When is it time for my daughter to remember she has a mother? When is it time for you to stop parading your mistress around like my daughter doesn't exist? The blonde woman's eyes widened. Sophia's face went white, and Daniel's expression shifted into something ugly and cold. You're confused, he said calmly, but his voice carried a threat. You're having one of your episodes. Sophia, why don't you go get a nurse? I'm not confused. I turned to Sophia, grabbing her hands before she could pull away. Baby, please, look at me. Really look at me. Do I seem confused? Do I seem like someone who needs to be locked away? Her hands were trembling in mine. Or maybe I was the one trembling. I couldn't tell anymore. Sophia, you have to listen. That's enough. Daniel's hand clamped down on my wrist, his grip painfully tight. You're making a scene. You're upsetting everyone. I yanked my arm away. Good. Maybe someone should be upset. Maybe someone should see what you're doing to your wife. To me, to everyone you're supposed to care about. Mr. Thornton materialized at Daniel's elbow, his professional smile firmly in place. Is there a problem here? My mother-in-law is having an episode, Daniel said smoothly. We should probably get her back to her room. I'm not having an episode, I shouted. I'm trying to talk to my daughter. I'm trying to make her see. Two orderlies appeared from nowhere, their hands firm on my shoulders. One of them I'd never seen before, a large man with cold eyes and no patience for resistance. Come on, Mrs. Bruna, he said. Let's get you somewhere quiet. No, wait, Sophia. I struggled against their grip, but they were too strong. Sophia, please, don't let them do this. Don't let him win. The last thing I saw before they dragged me into the hallway was Sophia's face. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks while Daniel whispered something in her ear, and the blonde woman looked on with an expression somewhere between pity and contempt. My daughter was crying, but she wasn't coming to help me. They locked me in my room. Actually locked it. I heard the key turn in the mechanism, heard Mr. Thornton's voice outside telling the orderlies to keep her contained until she calms down. I pounded on the door until my fists ached, screamed until my throat was raw, but nobody came. Nobody cared. Eventually, I collapsed on my bed, staring at the ceiling, counting those same 63 tiles over and over because it was the only thing I could control. Hours later, when the sun had set and the facility had gone quiet with that particular silence of people trying to forget they're trapped, I heard a key in my lock. Marina slipped inside, her face grim. I'm so sorry, she said. I tried to stop them, but I know. My voice was hoarse, broken. It's not your fault. She sat beside me, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said the words that would change everything. I found something. In Mr. Thornton's office. Financial records that he shouldn't have left where I could see them. She pulled out her phone, showing me photos of documents covered in numbers and signatures. Daniel has been paying this facility $25,000 a month. Not for your care, for your silence. $25,000 to keep me locked away, to make sure I couldn't interfere with whatever plan he was executing. There's more, Marina continued, scrolling through the photos. Property transfer documents, life insurance policies, power of attorney papers with your signature. Except I don't think that's actually your signature. I leaned closer, squinting at the screen. The signature was close to mine, but wrong. The loops were different. The pressure uneven. He forged my name. Yes. And if I'm reading these documents correctly, he's been systematically transferring your assets into his name. The apartment you lived in? He sold it 2 weeks ago. The small savings account you mentioned? Emptied. There's even a life insurance policy, one taken out 6 months ago, with him as the sole beneficiary. The room tilted. How much? $500,000. I couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was telling me. Daniel hadn't just wanted me out of the way. He'd been planning this for months, stealing from me, erasing my existence piece by piece. Why would he need the money? I finally managed. He has a good job. He always acted like, I did some digging, Marina said quietly. Daniel's company is under investigation for fraud. He's been embezzling for years. When the truth comes out, he'll lose everything. But if he has your assets, your insurance policy, if he's gotten Sophia to sign over her rights to anything you might have left her in a will, he can disappear, I finished. Start over somewhere else, with that blonde woman, while Sophia is left with nothing and I'm locked in here, unable to tell anyone what he's done. Marina nodded. And if something were to happen to you while you're here, something that looks natural, like an accident or a health crisis, nobody would question it. You're elderly. You've been classified as having mental health issues. The paperwork is all in place. The weight of what she was saying settled over me like a shroud. Daniel wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to kill me. Maybe not with his own hands, but by putting me in a place where my death would be convenient. Expected. Barely worth investigating. We need to do something, I said, but my voice sounded far away, detached, like I was listening to someone else speak. We need evidence. Real evidence. Enough to prove what he's doing. I have some of it, Marina said, gesturing to her phone. But not enough. These photos could be explained away. We need more. We need proof of the forgery. Documentation of the financial fraud. Evidence that this facility is complicit. How do we get that? Marina's expression hardened with determination. We do what people like Daniel never expect. We fight back. Quietly. Carefully. But we fight. For the first time since arriving at this place, I felt something other than despair. Not hope exactly. Not yet. But something close. Something dangerous. Tell me what to do, I said. And Marina smiled. The kind of smile that meant we were done being victims. First, she said, we find out exactly what Daniel is planning. And then we make sure it destroys him instead of you. The hardest part about being trapped isn't the locked doors or the controlled schedule or even the loneliness. It's the slow erosion of yourself. The way you start to wonder if maybe they're right. If maybe you are confused. If maybe you do deserve to be here. I caught myself thinking that way more than once during the 5th week, when I'd forget what day it was, which was easy to do when every day looked identical. When I'd call Marina by the wrong name because exhaustion had turned my brain to fog. When I'd stand in the middle of my room and forget why I'd gotten up in the first place. Those moments terrified me more than anything Daniel had done, because if I lost myself, if I actually became the confused, helpless woman they claimed I was, then he'd already won. Marina kept me grounded. She'd slip into my room during her breaks, always checking first to make sure no one was watching, and we'd go over everything we knew, every document, every overheard conversation, every piece of the puzzle that we were slowly, carefully assembling. We need something concrete, she said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. Something that proves Daniel's intention to harm you. Right now, all we have is financial fraud, which is serious, but not enough to get you out of here immediately. What about the forged signature? I asked. Isn't that enough? It's his word against yours, and you're the one who's been labeled mentally unstable. He's the successful businessman with the concerned wife and the expensive lawyer. Marina's expression was grim. We need him to incriminate himself, on record. Somewhere it can't be denied or explained away. How do we do that? She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. We make him think he's winning. We make him comfortable. Comfortable people get careless. So we waited. And while we waited, I got worse. Not really worse, but I performed worse. I let myself seem more confused during medication time, asking the same questions twice, forgetting conversations I'd just had. I shuffled when I walked, moved slower, let my voice trail off mid-sentence as if I couldn't quite hold on to thoughts anymore. It was easier than it should have been to pretend to fade away, maybe because part of me actually was fading, the part that believed good things could happen, the part that trusted people to do the right thing. Mr. Thornton noticed the change. I saw him watching me during mealtimes, saw him make notes on his ever-present clipboard. Once, I caught him on the phone outside the dining hall, his voice carrying just enough for me to hear. Yes, the transition is progressing as expected. She's settling in nicely. No concerns about her trying to leave or cause trouble. Translation. I was becoming compliant. Broken. Exactly what they'd paid for. The visits from Sophia stopped completely after the family day incident. Not that they'd been frequent before, but now there was nothing. No calls. No messages. No acknowledgement that I existed at all. I told myself it was better this way, that it would hurt less if I simply accepted that my daughter was gone, replaced by a stranger who shared her face, but none of her heart. But late at night, when the facility was quiet and I had nothing but my thoughts for company, I'd pull out the one photo I'd managed to keep. Sophia, at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a drawing she'd made at school. That's you, Mama, she'd told me proudly, pointing to a stick figure with a giant smile. You're the sunshine. I used to be someone's sunshine. Now I was just someone to be forgotten. Mrs. Chen died during my 6th week at Shady Pines. I didn't know her well. She'd been too lost in her own memories to connect with anyone in the present. But her death shook me in ways I hadn't expected. One day she was there, turning the pages of her photo album, and the next day her room was empty, being cleaned and prepared for whoever would take her place. No funeral, no memorial, just an empty room and a new name on the door within 48 hours. What happened to her things? I asked Marina when she came by that evening. Her photo albums? Her clothes? Marina's jaw tightened. Disposed of. That's the policy here. When someone dies and the family doesn't claim their belongings within 72 hours, everything goes to donation or trash. Her family didn't come. Her family stopped coming 2 years ago. I thought about those photo albums, filled with faces of people who'd once loved Mrs. Chen enough to pose for pictures with her. People who'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays. People who'd promised, just by existing in those photographs, that she mattered. Where were they when she died? Where were they when her belongings were loaded into garbage bags and hauled away like she'd never existed at all? That's not going to be me, I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. I won't die here. I won't disappear like she did. Marina squeezed my hand. No, you won't. Because we're going to get you out. But getting out required more than just wanting it. It required a miracle. Or at least, a mistake. Daniel provided both. He came to visit me alone one afternoon during my 7th week. No Sophia, no blonde mistress, just him, walking into my room with that smile I'd once thought was charming, and now recognized as the expression of a predator who'd cornered his prey. "Hello, Bruna," he said, settling into the chair by my window like he had every right to be there. "How are you feeling?" I played my part. Looked at him with vague confusion, as if I wasn't quite sure who he was. "Daniel?" "That's right." His smile widened. "I'm glad you remember me. I was worried you might be having trouble with your memory. Where's Sophia? Is she coming?" Something flickered across his face. Satisfaction, maybe. Sophia couldn't make it today. She's been very busy with personal matters. Personal matters. I wondered if that was code for dealing with his mistress, or dealing with the realization that her husband was a monster. "I wanted to talk to you about some paperwork," Daniel continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "Just some routine financial documents that need your signature. Nothing to worry about." He spread the papers across my lap, pointing to signature lines with a pen that probably cost more than I used to make in a week. I squinted at the documents, pretending to struggle with the small print. "What are they?" I asked, my voice trembling just slightly. Perfect performance of a confused elderly woman. "Just updates to your living will. Making sure everything is in order. You know, in case something happens. In case something happens." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I picked up the pen with shaking hands, brought it close to the paper, and then I stopped. "I should probably read them first," I said. "My mother always told me never to sign something I haven't read." Daniel's smile tightened. "Of course. But it's all standard language. Legal jargon. Nothing you need to worry about." "Still," I insisted, channeling every ounce of stubborn old woman I could muster, "I'd like to read them." I watched his patience fray in real time. The smile became forced. His hand clenched around his own pen, but he couldn't push too hard. Not when I was supposedly too confused to understand what I was signing. "Fine," he said eventually. "Take your time. I'll come back tomorrow and we can finish this then." He left the papers with me, his first mistake. The moment he was gone, I photographed every page with the phone Marina had smuggled to me, an old device she'd bought at a pawn shop, untraceable, used only for gathering evidence. My hands shook as I captured each document, making sure every word was legible. When Marina reviewed the photos that night, her face went pale. "He's trying to get you to sign away your rights to contest his power of attorney. If you sign this, he becomes your legal guardian with complete control over your assets, your medical decisions, everything." She scrolled through the images, her expression growing darker. "And this one, this is a new life insurance policy for $750,000, with him as the beneficiary. Why would he need another policy if he already has one? Because he's getting greedier or more desperate." Marina zoomed in on the fine print. "Look at this clause. It pays out double if death occurs within the first 6 months of the policy." The room felt cold suddenly. How long ago was Mrs. Chen's policy updated before she died? Marina's eyes met mine. 5 months. We sat in silence, the implications settling over us like ash. Daniel wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to collect on my death. And based on the pattern with Mrs. Chen, that death was supposed to happen soon. "We need to move faster," I said. "We need to get this evidence to someone who can actually do something with it." "Who?" Marina asked. "The police?" You're a woman who's been committed to a mental health facility. He's a respectable businessman. Who do you think they'll believe? She was right, and I hated it. Then what do we do? Marina was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then her eyes lit up with an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. We make him confess. On tape. We get him to admit everything, the fraud, the forgery, the plan to kill you, and we make sure it's recorded where it can't be erased or denied. How? We make him angry. Angry people say things they shouldn't, especially angry people who think they've already won. The next day, when Daniel returned for my signature, I was ready. Marina had positioned herself in the hallway, her phone recording through the crack in the door. I'd practiced what I was going to say, how I was going to push his buttons without pushing so hard that he'd just leave. "I've been thinking about these papers," I said when he settled into his chair, "and I'm not going to sign them." His expression barely changed, but I saw his jaw tighten. "Bruna, we discussed this. These are important documents. Important to you, maybe. Not to me." I looked directly at him, dropping the confused act entirely. "I know what you're doing, Daniel. I know about the money you've stolen, the signatures you've forged, the policies you've taken out on my life." For just a second, genuine surprise crossed his face. Then it hardened into something ugly. "You don't know what you're talking about. You're confused." "I'm not confused." My voice rose. "I'm not senile or crazy or whatever lie you've been telling Sophia to keep her away from me. I'm perfectly aware of what's happening. You're stealing from me. You've trapped me here. And you're planning to kill me." Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's enough. You're having an episode. Stop saying that." I stood too, facing him. "Stop pretending I'm the problem. You're the one who forged my signature. You're the one paying this facility to keep me locked away. You're the one who took out life insurance policies on me like I'm some kind of investment that pays out when I die." "Lower your voice," he hissed, glancing toward the door. "Why? Afraid someone will hear? Afraid they'll realize you're not the concerned son-in-law you pretend to be?" I stepped closer. "How much debt are you in, Daniel? How much did you steal from your company? How much do you need my death to cover?" His hand shot out and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "You stupid old woman. Do you really think anyone will believe you? You're in a mental facility. You're documented as unstable, paranoid. No one is going to take your word over mine." "Maybe not," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the pain. "But they might believe the evidence. The forged signatures, the financial records, the life insurance policies that pay out double if I die in the next few months." His grip tightened. "What evidence? You don't have anything. Are you sure about that?" For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. And that's when I knew we had him. "You can't prove anything," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Can't I? Marina's been very helpful. Did you know she has access to Mr. Thornton's office? Did you know she's been photographing documents? Recording conversations?" I smiled, and it felt good to watch him realize he'd underestimated me. "You thought I was helpless. You thought locking me away would make me disappear, but you forgot something important." "What's that?" His voice was barely a whisper now. "You forgot that underestimating women, especially old women, is always a mistake." He released my arm and stepped back, his face pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" We stared at each other across the small room, and I saw the exact moment he realized his perfect plan was falling apart. Saw him calculate whether he could salvage this. Saw him understand that maybe, just maybe, he'd already lost. "Sophia will never believe you," he said finally. "I've made sure of that." Those words hurt more than his grip on my arm had, but I didn't let him see it. "We'll see," I said quietly. He left without another word, and the moment the door closed, Marina rushed in. "Did you get it?" I asked. She held up her phone, eyes bright with triumph. "Every word. Having evidence and knowing what to do with it are two different things." Marina and I sat in my room that night, her phone between us like a ticking bomb, trying to figure out our next move. "We can't just go to the police," Marina said, keeping her voice low even though we were alone. "Daniel has connections, money, lawyers who'll bury this before it sees daylight." "What about a lawyer of my own?" "With what money? He's frozen your accounts. And any lawyer worth hiring will want a retainer you can't pay." She rubbed her eyes, exhausted. "We need someone who can't be bought. Someone who'll care more about justice than their bank balance. I thought about that word, justice. It felt almost quaint, like something from a different era when right and wrong weren't quite so negotiable. What about the media? I asked. Reporters love stories about corrupt businessmen and vulnerable victims. Marina's expression shifted. That could work, if we find the right journalist. Someone who won't just sensationalize it but will actually investigate. She started scrolling through her phone. I know someone. A reporter who did a series on elder abuse last year. She's tough. Doesn't back down. Will she believe us? If we show her what we have? Yes. But Bruna, once we do this, there's no going back. Daniel will know we're coming for him, and he'll fight back. I thought about Sophia, about how this would destroy whatever illusion she'd been living under, about how she'd have to face the truth that the man she'd married was a monster who'd used her to imprison her own mother. It would break her heart, but maybe broken hearts could heal. Mine had started to, piece by painful piece, since Marina had given me hope. Do it, I said. Contact the reporter, set up a meeting. Whatever happens, it has to be better than staying here waiting to die. The reporter's name was Jessica Chen. No relation to the Mrs. Chen who died here, but the coincidence felt like a sign. She agreed to meet us the following evening at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the facility, neutral territory where Marina could slip away during her dinner break, and I could, well, escape. That was the tricky part. I'm not officially allowed to leave, I reminded Marina as we planned. The door codes, the security, the fact that Mr. Thornton has me flagged as a flight risk. Leave that to me, Marina said with a confidence I desperately wanted to believe in. I've been working here 3 years. I know the shift changes, the blind spots, the doors that don't always lock properly. We can get you out. And back in? She hesitated. That's the part I'm still working on. The day of the meeting, I barely ate. My stomach was too tight with anxiety and something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. Marina had given me clothes to wear. Normal street clothes instead of the institutional garments I'd been living in. Just putting on real pants and a sweater felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. At 6:30, during the dinner rush when the staff was overwhelmed and distracted, Marina came to my room. It's now or never, she said. Follow me. Don't run. Don't look nervous. If anyone asks, you're going to physical therapy. My heart hammered as we walked through the corridors. Past the dining hall where residents were eating their bland meals. Past the nurse's station where someone was on the phone, not paying attention. Past the security desk where the guard was dealing with a resident who'd triggered the alarm trying to leave through the wrong door. Marina had orchestrated all of it. The distractions. The chaos. The perfect moment when no one was watching the side exit that led to the parking lot. And then we were outside. The evening air hit my face like a blessing. Cool and clean and full of possibilities that didn't exist within those walls. I'd been inside for nearly 8 weeks, and I'd forgotten what freedom tasted like. Marina's car was parked at the far end of the lot. We walked quickly but calmly, 2 women finishing a shift, nothing suspicious about us at all. It wasn't until we were inside the car, doors locked, engine running, that I finally let myself breathe. We did it, I whispered. First part, Marina corrected, pulling out of the parking lot. Now we have to make this count. The coffee shop was busy with the after-work crowd, people grabbing lattes and pastries, typing on laptops, living normal lives that didn't involve locked doors and forged signatures and insurance policies that paid out when you died. I felt like an alien among them, someone who'd forgotten how to exist in the regular world. Jessica Chen was already there, sitting at a corner table with a notebook and a recorder. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie people could tell and knew exactly how to spot the truth. "Mrs. Bruna Morrison?" she asked as we approached, standing to shake my hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "Just Bruna," I said, sitting down across from her. Marina slid in beside me, protective. "Marina filled me in on the basics," Jessica said, getting straight to business. "But I need to hear it from you. Everything. And I need to see the evidence." So I told her. Everything. Starting with the voice message on my birthday and ending with Daniel's confession in my room 3 days ago. I didn't cry this time. Didn't let my voice shake. I just laid out the facts like pieces of a puzzle she could assemble herself. Jessica listened without interrupting, taking notes in shorthand that covered page after page. When I finished, she sat back and exhaled slowly. "This is bigger than elder abuse," she said. "This is fraud, conspiracy, possibly attempted murder. If what you're telling me is true—" "It is true," Marina interrupted, pulling out her phone. "And we have proof." For the next hour, Jessica reviewed everything: the photos of the forged documents, the recordings of Daniel's conversations with Mr. Thornton, the audio from his confrontation with me where he'd admitted to stealing my money and trapping me at Shady Pines. Jessica's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. "This is good," she said finally. "This is really good. But I need to verify some things independently. Financial records from your bank, confirmation of the policy purchases, an expert to authenticate the signature forgeries." She looked at me directly. "Are you prepared for what comes next? Once I publish this story, your life becomes public. Daniel will hire lawyers. There will be depositions, possibly a trial. It's going to get ugly." "It's already ugly," I said. "At least this way, people will know the truth." Jessica nodded slowly. "I'll need a few days to verify everything and put the story together. In the meantime, you need to stay safe. Staying at the facility is obviously not an option." "She can stay with me," Marina said. "I have a spare room. It's small, but it's safe." "Are you sure?" I asked her. "This could cost you your job, maybe worse." Marina's jaw set with determination. "Some things are worth losing a job over. This is one of them." We left the coffee shop as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that I'd almost forgotten existed. Marina drove to her apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a building that had seen better days but was clean and quiet, and blessedly free of locks I couldn't open from the inside. "The couch pulls out into a bed," Marina said, showing me around. "It's not much, but it's perfect," I said, and meant it, because it wasn't about the space or the furniture. It was about choosing to be here, about having control over my own life again. That night, lying on Marina's pull-out couch with a blanket she'd given me and a pillow that smelled like lavender detergent, I let myself think about Sophia for the first time in days. Really think about her, not just the hollow shell Daniel had turned her into. I thought about the little girl who'd cried when she stepped on a bug by accident, the teenager who'd stayed up all night with me when her father died, both of us too heartbroken to sleep, the young woman who'd told me on her wedding day that I was her hero, and she hoped she could be half the woman I was. That girl was still in there somewhere, trapped under layers of Daniel's manipulation and lies and systematic destruction of everything she'd once believed about herself and her family, but still there, and I was going to find her, no matter what it took. My phone, the secret one Marina had given me, buzzed at 2 a.m, a text from an unknown number. "I know what you did. I know where you are. And if you don't back off, Sophia pays the price." Daniel. Somehow he'd found out I was gone, found this number, found a way to threaten me even from a distance. I should have been terrified, should have panicked, but all I felt was rage. Cold, clarifying rage. He'd taken everything from me. My home, my dignity, my relationship with my daughter. 8 weeks of my life locked in a room like an animal. And now he thought he could threaten Sophia, use her as a weapon against me. And I'd just surrender? He really didn't know who he was dealing with. I texted back, "Come after Sophia, and I'll make sure the police get every piece of evidence tomorrow instead of waiting for the article. Your choice." The phone stayed silent after that, but I knew this was far from over. Jessica called 3 days later. "The story runs tomorrow morning. Front page, online, and print. I've verified everything." The bank confirmed the fraudulent withdrawals. A forensic document examiner confirmed the signatures were forged, and I got a statement from a former employee at Shady Pines who corroborated that the facility regularly accepts payments to keep residents isolated. What happens now? Now, the world finds out what Daniel Morrison really is, and you, Bruna, get to watch him fall. The article hit at 6 a.m. By 7, it had been shared 10,000 times. By 8, it was trending on social media. By 9, news vans were parked outside Daniel's office, and Shady Pines was crawling with investigators. Marina and I watched the coverage from her living room, her laptop open on the coffee table, showing us comment after comment from people outraged by Daniel's actions, supporting me, calling for justice. "You did it," Marina whispered. "You actually did it." But I wasn't celebrating, because somewhere out there, Sophia was reading this article, learning the truth about her husband, realizing what he'd done to her mother, and I couldn't be there to hold her when her world collapsed. My phone rang at 10:30. Unknown number. I answered it anyway. "Mom?" Sophia's voice. Broken. Crying. But still my daughter's voice. "Baby," I breathed. "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry." Don't apologize." She was sobbing now. "I'm the one who should be sorry. I'm the one who let him do this to you. I should have known. I should have seen. He manipulated you. That's what people like him do. It's not your fault." "Yes, it is. I abandoned you. I let him lock you away and I didn't even question it. What kind of daughter does that? The kind who was being controlled by someone who knew exactly how to isolate you from everyone who could have helped you see the truth." I was crying too now. "Sophia, listen to me. We can fix this. We can fix us. But you have to get away from him. Right now. Today. Pack whatever you can carry and leave." "I already did. I'm at a hotel. I left him this morning after I read the article." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom, the things he said about you, the lies he told me, he made me believe you were losing your mind, that you were dangerous, that putting you in that place was the only way to keep you safe. I know, sweetheart. I know. Can I see you? Please? I need to see you." I gave her Marina's address, and she promised to be there within the hour. When Sophia arrived, I barely recognized her. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 2 months, thin and pale and haunted. But when she saw me standing in Marina's doorway, something in her face broke open. "Mama," she whispered. And then she was in my arms, and we were both crying. And 8 weeks of pain and betrayal and loss poured out of both of us in great heaving sobs that shook our bodies and emptied our souls of everything we'd been holding inside. "I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I know, baby, I know. And I forgive you. Because I did. Not because what she'd done was okay. Not because the pain would disappear overnight. But because she was my daughter. And love, real love, doesn't come with conditions or expiration dates. We had a long road ahead of us. Rebuilding trust. Healing wounds. Learning how to be mother and daughter again instead of victim and accomplice. But we would walk that road together. And Daniel? Daniel would walk a very different road. One that led straight to a courtroom and, if justice existed in this world, a prison cell. The police came for Daniel on the 3rd day after the article published. Sophia and I watched the news coverage together from Marina's apartment, our hands clasped tight as cameras captured him being led from his office building in handcuffs, his expensive suit, his carefully styled hair, his expression of disbelief that this was actually happening to him. "He looks smaller," Sophia said quietly. "I used to think he was so powerful, so in control, but now he just looks pathetic." She was right. Without the charm and the manipulation and the carefully constructed image, Daniel was just an ordinary criminal being caught for ordinary crimes. There was nothing special about him, nothing impressive. He was simply a coward who'd preyed on people weaker than himself because he lacked the courage to build anything real. The charges came quickly: fraud, forgery, elder abuse, conspiracy, embezzlement from his company, something the police had discovered during their investigation into his finances. The list kept growing as investigators dug deeper into his dealings. Mr. Thornton was arrested the same day. Turned out Shady Pines had been operating as what the police called an elder warehousing scheme for years, accepting payments from families who wanted their relatives hidden away without the scrutiny of legitimate care facilities. 12 other residents were found to be in situations similar to mine, imprisoned by family members who stood to benefit from their isolation or death. The facility was shut down. The residents were relocated to proper care centers or, in cases like mine, released to family who actually wanted them. Sophia moved in with Marina and me while she figured out her next steps. The apartment was cramped with 3 of us, but I wouldn't have changed it for anything. Every morning I woke up to the sound of my daughter breathing in the next room. Every evening we sat together and talked, really talked, about everything that had happened. "I should have known," Sophia said one night over the simple dinner Marina had taught us to make together. "All those times he spoke badly about you. All those suggestions that you were becoming a burden. I should have questioned it. He was very good at what he did," I reminded her. "That's what makes people like Daniel so dangerous. They know exactly which buttons to push. But you're my mother. I should have trusted you over him." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You were in an impossible situation. He isolated you from me gradually, so slowly you didn't even notice it happening. That's not your fault." Marina cleared her throat gently. "My therapist says that manipulation works by making you doubt your own perception of reality. The abuser creates a version of events that seems more believable than what you're actually experiencing. It's not about being weak or stupid. It's about being human." Sophia had started seeing Marina's therapist twice a week. Working through the trauma of realizing the man she'd married had been systematically destroying her family, learning to forgive herself for not seeing it sooner. I was seeing the same therapist, working through my own trauma, the months of isolation and fear and believing I'd lost my daughter forever, the humiliation of being treated like I was less than human, the rage I still felt when I thought about Daniel's voice telling me to rot. Healing, we were learning, wasn't a straight line. Some days were good. Some days Sophia couldn't stop crying. Some days I woke up from nightmares where I was back in room 217, pounding on a locked door while no one came. But we were healing together. And that made all the difference. The trial was scheduled for 6 months away. The prosecutor, a woman named Andrea Winters who reminded me of Jessica in her fierce determination, called me regularly to prepare me for testimony. What Daniel's lawyers would ask, how they'd try to discredit me, the ways they'd attempt to paint me as confused or vindictive or mentally unstable. "They're going to try to break you on the stand," Andrea warned me during one of our preparation sessions. "They'll bring up every time you forgot something or seemed confused at Shady Pines. They'll suggest you're lying about the abuse to get money or attention. Let them try," I said. And I meant it, because I wasn't the same woman who'd been locked away 8 months ago. That woman had been beaten down by circumstance and betrayal, had doubted herself, had wondered if maybe everyone was right and she was the problem. This woman, the one who'd survived and fought back and won, knew exactly who she was. And no expensive lawyer was going to take that away from me. Jessica's article had sparked a national conversation about elder abuse and the systemic failures that allowed people like Daniel to prey on vulnerable family members. She'd written follow-up pieces, been interviewed on morning shows, used her platform to shine light on how many families warehoused their elderly relatives in facilities that profited from neglect. She came to visit us one afternoon, bringing flowers and an advance copy of the book she was writing about the case. "I wanted you to see it before publication," she said, handing me the manuscript. "If there's anything you want changed, anything that doesn't feel right, tell me. This is your story. It should be told the way you want it told." I flipped through the pages, seeing my life transformed into chapters and subheadings and narrative arcs. It was strange and uncomfortable and also deeply validating, proof that what happened to me mattered, that my pain meant something beyond just my own experience. "It's perfect," I told her. "Thank you for caring enough to get it right." Sophia got a job at a small accounting firm. Ironic, given that her husband had been an embezzler, but she said she wanted to help prevent the kind of financial abuse Daniel had committed. She moved into her own apartment after 3 months, but we saw each other almost daily, slowly rebuilding what he'd tried to destroy. Marina was promoted to assistant director at a new care facility that had hired her specifically because of her role in exposing Shady Pines. She used her position to implement strict oversight protocols and family visitation policies that made it nearly impossible for residents to be isolated the way I had been. "You changed things," I told her one evening. "Not just for me, for everyone who comes after." She smiled, but there was sadness in it too. "I just wish I'd done it sooner. For Mrs. Chen, for all the others who died before anyone noticed they were being erased. As for me, I started volunteering at a senior advocacy center, talking to other elderly people who'd been abused or neglected or taken advantage of by family members who were supposed to love them, sharing my story, letting them know they weren't alone, that it was possible to fight back and win. One woman I met, Margaret, 72, whose son had been stealing her Social Security checks for years, cried when I told her what I'd been through. "I thought I was the only one," she whispered. "I thought there was something wrong with me for letting it happen." "There's nothing wrong with you," I told her, holding her hand the way I wished someone had held mine during those first terrible days at Shady Pines. "The only people with something wrong are the ones who abuse trust, who use love as a weapon. You survived. That makes you stronger than you know." The months passed. Fall turned to winter, turned to spring. The trial date approached, and with it, the reckoning Daniel had been avoiding his entire life. The night before I was scheduled to testify, Sophia came to my new apartment, a small one-bedroom I'd rented with money from a settlement the facility's insurance had paid to avoid further litigation. "Are you nervous?" she asked, sitting beside me on the couch I'd bought at a thrift store. "Nothing fancy, but mine, chosen by me." "Terrified," I admitted. "What if I mess up? What if I forget something important? What if the jury doesn't believe me?" Sophia took my hand, and I saw strength in her eyes that hadn't been there months ago. She'd grown during this ordeal, become someone I barely recognized but was so proud of. "Mom, you've already won. Whether or not Daniel goes to prison, whether or not the jury believes every word, you've already won. Because you're here, you're free, you're alive, and you're not broken." She was right. I'd spent so long focused on making sure Daniel faced consequences that I'd almost missed the most important truth. I'd survived. Against odds that should have destroyed me, I'd survived and come back stronger. Whatever happened in that courtroom tomorrow, nothing could take that away from me. The courthouse was smaller than I expected, more intimate, which somehow made it more terrifying when I walked to the witness stand and saw Daniel sitting at the defense table in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, flanked by lawyers who'd been paid 6 figures to destroy my credibility. He didn't look at me, kept his eyes down, his expression neutral, playing the role of misunderstood victim, but I knew what lived behind that mask. I'd seen the real him in that nursing home room when he thought no one was watching. Andrea walked me through my testimony with patience and precision, where I'd lived before Shady Pines, my relationship with Sophia, the day Daniel had me committed, what life was like in that facility, the voice message, the locked door, the confession she'd recorded. I spoke clearly, didn't cry even when the memories threatened to overwhelm me. This wasn't about emotion. This was about truth, about making sure 12 strangers understood exactly what had been done to me and why it mattered. Then came the cross-examination. Daniel's lead attorney was exactly what I expected. A man in his 60s with silver hair and a voice that dripped false concern. He approached the witness stand with a folder thick with documents, each one carefully selected to make me look unreliable. "Mrs. Morrison," he began, his tone gentle, patronizing, "you've testified that my client deliberately had you committed to Shady Pines against your will. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And you claim this was part of an elaborate scheme to steal your assets and eventually cause your death?" "It's not a claim. It's what happened." He smiled slightly, like I'd said something amusing. "Mrs. Morrison, isn't it true that you were experiencing memory problems before your admission to the facility? That you'd left your stove on multiple times? That you'd called your daughter at odd hours, confused about the time?" "No." Daniel told Sophia those things, but they never happened. "So your daughter is lying?" "My daughter was lied to. There's a difference." He consulted his notes, flipping pages with practiced theatricality. "The facility records show several instances of confusion during your stay, forgetting staff names, becoming disoriented about dates. Are those records falsified as well?" I took a breath, remembering what Andrea had told me. "Stay calm. Don't let him provoke you." I was confused because I was traumatized. Because I'd been kidnapped and locked away from everything I knew. That's not the same as having dementia. "Kidnapped?" He raised his eyebrows. "Isn't it true that your daughter voluntarily placed you in care because she was concerned about your well-being?" "My daughter was manipulated into believing I needed care. She was told lies. She was isolated from me so she couldn't see the truth. Or perhaps," he said, his voice taking on an edge, "you simply couldn't accept that you needed help. That your daughter was acting out of love, not conspiracy. If she was acting out of love, why did Daniel empty my bank accounts? Why did he forge my signature on documents? Why did he take out life insurance policies that paid double if I died within 6 months? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay composed. Love doesn't look like theft and murder plots. Alleged theft. Alleged plots. He turned to the jury. Mrs. Morrison, isn't it possible that you've constructed an elaborate narrative to explain away your own declining health? That you've cast my client as a villain because you can't accept the reality of aging? Before I could answer, Andrea stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. Counsel, ask questions. Don't make speeches. But the damage was done. I could see some jurors looking at me differently now, wondering if maybe the lawyer was right. If maybe I was just a confused old woman who couldn't accept reality. The attorney continued for another hour, picking apart every detail of my testimony, suggesting I was bitter about Sophia's marriage, implying I'd been difficult to live with, painting a picture of a woman who'd become paranoid and accusatory when her daughter had simply tried to help. By the time I stepped down from the witness stand, I felt hollowed out, exhausted, like I'd just run a marathon while people threw rocks at me. Sophia was waiting outside the courtroom. She wrapped her arms around me immediately. "You were amazing," she said. "You didn't let him break you." I don't know. Some of those jurors looked like they believed him. Some always will. That's not your fault. She pulled back to look at me. But most of them saw through it. I watched their faces. They know he's guilty. I wanted to believe her, but doubt had crept back in, whispering that maybe Daniel would win after all. That maybe money and expensive lawyers really could rewrite reality. The prosecution spent the next 3 days building their case. They called the forensic document examiner who testified that my signatures had been forged on at least 7 different financial documents. They called my bank manager who confirmed unauthorized withdrawals totaling over $200,000. They called the insurance agent who'd sold Daniel those policies and admitted he'd thought it was strange but hadn't questioned it because the commission was substantial. And they called Marina. She was nervous. I could see it in the way her hands trembled slightly as she was sworn in. But once Andrea began asking questions, Marina's voice grew steady, strong. She walked the jury through everything she'd witnessed at Shady Pines, the special arrangements for my account, the restrictions on my communication, the conversation she'd overheard between Daniel and Mr. Thornton about keeping me settled. When Daniel's attorney tried to discredit her, suggesting she'd fabricated evidence because she'd been fired from the facility, Marina didn't flinch. "I wasn't fired," she said clearly. "I quit. Because I couldn't continue working somewhere that treated human beings like inconvenient inventory. And I didn't fabricate anything. The evidence speaks for itself." She played the recording she'd made of Daniel's confession in my room. His voice filled the courtroom. Cold, calculating, admitting to trapping me at Shady Pines, dismissing my concerns as paranoid delusions. I watched the jurors' faces as they listened. Saw the moment several of them stopped looking sympathetic to Daniel and started looking disgusted. The defense tried to recover. They called character witnesses who testified that Daniel was a respected businessman, a devoted husband, someone who'd only ever wanted what was best for his mother-in-law. They suggested the recording had been taken out of context, that Daniel had been frustrated and said things he didn't mean. But you can't unhear that kind of contempt. Can't explain away the coldness in his voice when he'd told me I was confused and paranoid and no one would believe me. On the 8th day of trial, Sophia was called to testify. I'd known this was coming, but watching my daughter walk to that witness stand, knowing she was about to expose the most painful parts of her life to strangers, made my heart ache. Andrea was gentle with her, asked about our relationship before Daniel, about how it had changed after the marriage, about the lies he'd told to isolate her from me. "He said your mother was becoming dangerous," Andrea said. "Did you believe him?" Sophia's voice was small. "Yes, he was my husband. I trusted him. And he was so convincing. He'd tell me about things Mom had supposedly done, leaving the stove on, getting confused about dates. And he'd sound so worried, so concerned. I thought I was helping her by agreeing to the placement. When did you realize you'd been deceived? When I read the article. When I saw all the evidence laid out. When I understood that everything he'd told me was a lie designed to steal from my mother and isolate both of us. Sophia's voice broke. I should have known sooner. I should have questioned him, but he made me doubt my own mother, and I'll have to live with that forever. Daniel's attorney was less gentle. He tried to suggest Sophia was only testifying against her husband to avoid her own culpability, that she'd been complicit in my imprisonment and was now trying to save herself. Sophia looked directly at Daniel for the first time since entering the courtroom. I loved you, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I trusted you, and you used that trust to destroy my family. You made me abandon my mother on her birthday. You made me believe she was sick when she was perfectly fine. You stole from her. You tried to kill her. And for what? Money? Your ego? Whatever it wasn't worth it. Because now you've lost everything. Your freedom. Your reputation. Me. She was crying by the time she finished, but she held his gaze. Didn't look away. And I saw something I hadn't seen before. Daniel's mask finally cracking. Just for a moment, his carefully maintained composure slipped, and I saw rage flash across his face. The jury saw it too. Closing arguments came on day 10. Andrea was brilliant, weaving together all the evidence into a narrative so clear even Daniel's expensive lawyers couldn't obscure it. She reminded the jury about the forged signatures, the stolen money, the insurance policies, the recording of Daniel admitting to trapping me. This isn't a complicated case, she said, looking each juror in the eye. Daniel Morrison saw an opportunity to enrich himself at his mother-in-law's expense. He systematically isolated her from her daughter. He had her imprisoned in a facility that profited from keeping her silent. He stole her money, forged her signature, and took out insurance policies that would pay out when she died. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a family disagreement. This was calculated, premeditated abuse, and it deserves to be punished. Daniel's attorney did his best, talked about reasonable doubt, about the possibility of misunderstandings, about an old woman's confused perception of events, but his words sounded hollow now, desperate. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Sophia and I waited in a small room down the hall from the courtroom, holding hands, barely speaking. Marina brought us coffee we didn't drink and sandwiches we couldn't eat. When the bailiff finally called us back, my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The jury filed in. None of them looked at Daniel. That was a good sign. Andrea had told me. Juries that convict usually can't look at the defendant. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. The forewoman handed a slip of paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. He read it without expression, then handed it back. What is your verdict? On the count of elder abuse, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of forgery, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty, 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 guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, through my chest, through every cell in my body that had carried the weight of what he'd done to me. Sophia was crying. So was Marina. So was I. Daniel sat perfectly still, his face blank, as the judge thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. As they led him away in handcuffs, he finally looked at me, and I looked back, letting him see that I wasn't broken, wasn't destroyed, wasn't the helpless victim he'd tried to create. I'd won, not just in court, but in every way that mattered. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded around us with cameras and microphones. Jessica pushed through the crowd to reach me first. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about that question, about everything I'd been through, everything I'd survived, everything I'd learned about myself and my daughter and what we were capable of when pushed to our limits. I feel free, I said. Anne meant it. Sentencing day arrived 3 weeks later. The courtroom was packed with people I'd never met. Advocates for elder rights, journalists covering the story, other victims of similar abuse who'd found courage in my case to come forward with their own. The judge was a woman in her late 50s named Patricia Huang. She'd presided over the entire trial with fairness and patience, but today her expression was stern as she looked down at Daniel from her bench. Mr. Morrison, she began, I've been a judge for 23 years. I've seen many kinds of criminals in that time, But what you did to Mrs. Bruna Morrison represents a particularly cruel form of betrayal. You didn't rob a stranger. You systematically dismantled the life of a woman who welcomed you into her family, who trusted you with her daughter's happiness, who believed you were someone worth loving. Daniel stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. His lawyers had advised him not to show emotion, to maintain dignity, even in defeat. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the barely contained rage that he was being held accountable. Judge Huang continued. You forged documents. You stole money. You imprisoned an innocent woman in a facility that profited from her isolation. And you did it all while manipulating your wife into believing she was acting out of love. The psychological damage you've caused, not just to Mrs. Morrison but to her daughter, is immeasurable. She paused, looking at the sentencing guidelines in front of her. The prosecution has recommended 15 years. The defense has requested leniency, citing your lack of prior criminal record and your contributions to the community. I've considered both arguments carefully. My heart was pounding. 15 years seemed like justice. But I'd learned during this process that justice and the law didn't always align perfectly. I'm sentencing you to 18 years in federal prison, Judge Huang said, and I heard gasps throughout the courtroom. You will be eligible for parole after serving 12 years, provided you demonstrate genuine remorse and participate in all rehabilitation programs. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution to Mrs. Morrison for all stolen funds, plus damages. The amount will be determined in civil proceedings, but I'm estimating it will exceed $500,000. 18 years. He'd be 73 when he got out, if he got out. Older than I was now. Finally understanding what it felt like to be trapped, controlled, stripped of freedom and dignity. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, relieved, like I'd been holding my breath for a year and could finally exhale. As they led Daniel away for the last time, he turned and looked at Sophia. Not me, her. And I saw something in his expression that made my blood run cold. Not remorse, but resentment. Blame. Even now, even after everything, he couldn't accept responsibility for his own choices. Sophia saw it too. She squeezed my hand tighter and whispered, I'm glad I'll never have to see him again. The civil lawsuit against Shady Pines settled quietly 2 months later. Their insurance paid out $2 million to be divided among the 12 residents who'd been unlawfully confined. My share was enough to buy a small house. Nothing extravagant, but mine. With a garden where I could grow tomatoes and a porch where Sophia and I could drink coffee on Sunday mornings. Marina moved into the guest room. Temporarily, she said, until she found her own place. But months passed and she never left. And eventually we stopped pretending. We'd become family. Not through blood, but through the kind of bond that forms when people save each other's lives. Sophia finished her divorce proceedings. Daniel had tried to fight for assets, but given his criminal conviction, the judge awarded Sophia everything: the house they'd shared, his retirement accounts, even his car. She sold most of it and donated a portion to elder advocacy organizations. The rest she split with me, insisting I deserved it after everything he'd stolen. I don't want his money, I told her. I don't want anything that came from him. It's not his money, Mom. It's yours. He stole it from you in the first place. This is just getting back what was always supposed to be yours. She had a point. So I accepted it. Used some of it to fund a scholarship for nursing students who wanted to specialize in elder care. Named it after Mrs. Chen, the woman who'd died alone, forgotten. Her photo albums thrown away like trash. If I couldn't save her, at least I could honor her memory. Make sure her death meant something. Jessica's book was published 8 months after the trial. It became a bestseller, sparking national conversations about elder abuse, family manipulation, and the systems that fail our most vulnerable citizens. She donated half her royalties to organizations fighting for elder rights. The other half she used to fund investigative journalism into similar cases. There are so many more stories like yours, she told me during a book signing event. So many people trapped, silenced, erased. Your courage to speak out has given them hope that maybe they can speak out too. I spoke at that event, told my story to a room full of strangers who listened with tears in their eyes. Afterward, dozens of people came up to me, elderly women who'd been financially abused by their children, Men whose families had abandoned them in substandard facilities. Adult children who'd discovered their parents were being mistreated and didn't know how to help. I gave them Marina's number, told them about the advocacy center where I volunteered, promised them they weren't alone, that it was possible to fight back, to survive, to rebuild. One woman, maybe 70 years old with hands twisted by arthritis, grabbed mine and said, "I thought I was too old to matter anymore, that my time for being important had passed, but you showed me that's not true, that we matter at every age." That moment, more than the trial verdict, more than Daniel's sentence, more than any of it, felt like real victory. On my 57th birthday, exactly 2 years after Daniel had left that voice message that destroyed and rebuilt my life, Sophia threw me a party. Nothing big, just Marina, Jessica, Andrea the prosecutor, a few women from the advocacy center, and some neighbors I'd gotten to know since moving into my little house. We ate cake I'd baked myself, chocolate with raspberry filling, my mother's recipe that I'd forgotten during those dark months, but remembered again when the fog of trauma finally lifted. We told stories and laughed, and nobody checked their watches, waiting for the celebration to end so they could escape. Sophia gave me a photo album. Not fancy, just a simple book with a blue cover. Inside were pictures she'd collected, some old ones from her childhood, some new ones from the past year. But every single photo was of the two of us together, mother and daughter, then and now. The last page had a note in her handwriting. "You taught me that love means showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're scared, even when someone tries to convince you that walking away is easier. Thank you for never walking away from me. Even when I walked away from you, I promised to spend the rest of my life showing up for you the way you've always shown up for me." I cried reading it. Happy tears this time. Healing tears. Later, after everyone had left and Sophia was washing dishes while Marina dried, I stood on my porch watching the sun set over my garden. The tomatoes were coming in beautifully, red and round and perfect. Evidence that good things could grow from soil that had been left fallow too long. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "My name is Patricia. I saw your interview on the news. My son has been stealing from me and I don't know what to do. Can you help?" I smiled, typed back, "Yes, I can help. You're not alone anymore." Because that was the truth I'd learned through all of this. None of us are alone unless we allow ourselves to be, unless we accept the isolation that abusers try to impose, unless we believe the lies that we're too old, too confused, too powerless to matter. I'd been 55 when my world collapsed, 56 when I rebuilt it. And now, at 57, I understood something I hadn't known before. Getting older doesn't mean getting weaker. Sometimes it means getting stronger, wiser, more certain of who you are and what you're willing to fight for. Daniel had tried to erase me, to reduce me to nothing more than a problem to be solved, a burden to be hidden away, a life insurance policy waiting to pay out. But I was still here, still breathing, still mattering. And every day I woke up in my little house with my daughter down the street and my chosen family around me and my garden growing outside my window, I proved that he'd failed. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but this wasn't revenge. This was justice. This was survival. This was an old woman refusing to disappear just because someone decided she was inconvenient. This was me, Bruna Morrison, standing on my porch on a beautiful evening, alive and free and whole, ready to help the next person who needed to know that it's never too late to fight back. That sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who give you the greatest opportunity to prove them wrong. And that love, real love, the kind that shows up even when it's hard, is always, always worth fighting for. I looked at the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I smiled, because I'd learned something Daniel would never understand. You can lock someone in a room, you can steal their money, and forge their signature and try to erase every trace of their existence. But you cannot break a woman who knows her own worth, and I finally knew mine.